In the dry heat of a Texas summer, just a few miles outside Dallas, the land rolls gently like ripples in a forgotten ocean. There, nestled between dust-colored hills and a gated community with white picket fences and iron gates, stood Evelyn Carter's Horse Rescue Ranch, a modest stretch of land with a barn that creaked in the wind, a rust-red farmhouse, and animals that were loved more than most people in town. Evelyn, known to her friends as Miss Evie, wasn't flashy or loud. She wore the same old denim shirt most days and talked to her horses more than she did to humans. But there was a stillness in her, the kind that only comes from surviving storms no one sees. She had lived on that ranch for over 20 years. Built it with her late husband, brick by brick, fence by fence. After he passed away, she never left. Never remarried. She didn't need to. Her days were full, cleaning stables, training skittish horses, cooking hearty breakfasts for the neighbor boy Travis, who came by each morning to help in exchange for a warm biscuit and a story. The boy adored her. Thought she was just a cool old lady who could fix a broken saddle blindfolded. He didn't know, not really, about her past. About the years she spent as a marine weapons instructor, or the metals collecting dust in a box beneath her bed. And she didn't talk about them. Not because she was hiding. Just because she didn't need to prove anything. Just beyond her eastern fence line lay the entrance to Willow Creek Estates, a picture-perfect, cookie-cutter gated community. The kind that bragged about its zero crime rate and annual fireworks displays. It was filled with retirees who fancied themselves generals of cul-de-sac kingdoms, and young professionals with too much money and too little humility. At the head of the HOA stood Craig Dunlow, a man who never quite got over failing the police academy. He wore polo shirts like a uniform and drove a white SUV with "Security Coordinator" magnetized to the door. Craig had two passions in life: writing citations for lawn violations and organizing the community's annual 4th of July shooting competition. The range they used was small, just a private HOA setup with a few benches, short-distance targets, and a sign that read, "Residents and approved guests only." It had no business being called a range, not with Evie's military background. But it meant the world to the folks in Willow Creek, who treated hitting a paper plate at 50 yards like the Olympics. It was early June when Evie first strolled down to the shooting range, wide-brimmed hat shading her weathered face, curiosity piqued by the clatter of gunfire and the hum of barbecues nearby. She leaned gently against the boundary fence, watching as men in tactical sunglasses barked tips at each other and high-fived after barely hitting their mark. It was all in good fun, she could see that. The whole place was draped in red, white, and blue. Lawn chairs, plastic flags, even a bald eagle balloon drifting lazily in the sky. She wasn't trying to be a nuisance, wasn't trying to intrude, just watching quietly like she always did. That's when Craig noticed her. He strutted over like he owned the dirt he walked on, one hand resting dramatically on his hip as if he expected a standoff. "Ma'am," he said, loud enough for several shooters to look up. "This is private property. The range is for registered residents and their invited guests only. I'm gonna have to ask you to back away." Evelyn raised her eyebrows but said nothing at first. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, just looked at him with that calm, weathered gaze of hers. "Didn't step over your line, sir. Just watching." Craig let out a laugh, but it was the kind that came with a sneer. "We don't allow spectators. Liability reasons," he said, gesturing vaguely like he had legal training. "This isn't a zoo." Evie glanced around at the families in folding chairs, the kids with popsicles, the half-dozen coolers of soda and hot dogs. "Doesn't look all that dangerous," she murmured. Craig didn't like that. "You got a problem, ma'am," he barked. "I don't know what you're doing here, but we don't need uninvited guests standing around judging the way we run things." "I wasn't judging. Just watching. Like I said, step off the line." Two of the neighborhood's volunteer security officers walked over. Craig waved them forward with a flourish, like he was directing traffic. They were just as puffed up, Young guys with badges that weren't real law enforcement, but acted like they were. One of them reached for her elbow. "We'll escort you back, ma'am." That's when Evelyn looked him in the eye, and for just a second, just a flicker, the old Marine came through. Her voice didn't raise. Her face didn't harden. But that look stopped the kid in his tracks. "I know my property line," she said, voice low. "And I haven't crossed it." The guard hesitated. Craig didn't. "You're done here," he said. "Don't come back unless you're invited." Evie tipped her hat slightly. Wasn't planning on it. Later that night, over cornbread and stew, Travis asked her why she let them talk to her like that. She shrugged. Sometimes the best way to answer noise is with silence. But the truth settled heavy in her chest. That condescension, that smugness, it wasn't just disrespect. It was a challenge. And Evelyn Carter didn't walk away from a challenge forever. The next day, she called the HOA office and asked how one might sign up for the next year's competition. Unfortunately, came Marta Jennings' overly sweet voice, "We only allow residents and their family members to compete." "I live adjacent," Evelyn said. "I can hear the event from my porch." "I understand, but the board voted to limit it to residents only. Liability. HOA policy. You understand." She did. What she also understood was that Craig Dunlow was behind it. Fine. If they wanted rules, she'd play by their rules. She hung up the phone and walked out to her barn, where an old canvas duffel waited in the corner. She hadn't touched it in years. Inside were gloves, ear protection, a spotting scope, and a bolt-action rifle that hadn't rusted a bit. She took it out slowly, reverently, like greeting an old friend. Then she began to practice. Every day. Every morning before the sun fully crested. Targets at 200, 400, 600 yards. Metal silhouettes. Movement drills. Breathing. One shot, one kill. The motto she hadn't spoken aloud in decades. She didn't need anyone to invite her to a competition. She'd earn her place. And next year, Craig Dunlow wouldn't just see her watching from the sidelines. He'd see her standing on the firing line. And he wouldn't forget it. Summer passed. Then fall. And as the winter frost touched the corners of Evelyn's ranch, the echoes of Craig Dunlow's smug dismissal never quite faded. It wasn't about a competition anymore. It was about dignity, the quiet kind that doesn't roar in the streets, but simmers behind calm eyes and calloused hands. Each morning, long before the Willow Creek folks took their golden retrievers out for a jog or gathered to sip pumpkin spice lattes near the community fountain, Evelyn was already halfway through her shooting drills. She didn't have their fancy paper targets or foam-padded benches. She had wind, distance, real terrain, the kind that didn't forgive mistakes. A string of tin cans stretched from her barn's fence to the old oak tree. Past that, real targets, steel silhouettes, a few she'd welded together herself, just like she had on base years ago. She measured each shot not by cheers or scores, but by the clean ping of bullet against steel and the precision of a pattern no one would ever see, not unless they knew what to look for. Travis noticed. The teen showed up every other morning, sometimes with a bag of feed, sometimes just to sit on the hay bale and watch. "Miss Evie," he said once, jaw half hanging open after she clipped a moving milk jug at over 600 yards, "are you training for something?" Evelyn only gave a half smile. "Just brushing up on old skills. Rust creeps in quiet." But Travis wasn't stupid. Word around Willow Creek was buzzing. Craig had upped the ante. The next shooting tournament, the big 4th of July one, wasn't going to be just residents anymore. He was calling in a guest SWAT team exhibition, all for show, all for ego. He'd pulled some strings with his cousin in the sheriff's department and managed to book a half-day demonstration by actual tactical officers. "It's to inspire neighborhood pride," Craig said smugly at the HOA meeting. "To show how our security measures reflect the best of the best. You know, like real operators. Not just backyard plinkers." The jab was subtle, but everyone knew who it was for. Marta, sitting in her usual spot taking minutes, leaned over after the meeting. "You're really doing all this because of her, huh?" Craig didn't flinch. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean." He sipped his diet soda. "It's about setting a tone. We can't have outsiders thinking they can just show up and play cowboy." By March, Evelyn received a letter from the HOA, though she wasn't a member. It was Craig's doing, of course. The letter politely reminded her that unauthorized observers near the HOA facilities might pose safety concerns, and she was advised to not approach the shooting range during any sanctioned events, including practice runs, which were now happening every Saturday. Evelyn folded the letter without emotion. "Safety concerns," she murmured. "Ain't that ironic?" Then, one Thursday evening, something strange happened. An elderly man named Mr. Cooper, a longtime resident of Willow Creek and the last remaining neighbor who still remembered Evelyn's husband, stopped by her fence. "I saw what they did," he said, his voice gravelly but sincere. "Craig's turning that competition into a dog and pony show." Evelyn smiled. "They can parade all they want. I'll still be here. I've got a quarter-acre at the edge of the HOA," he said, eyes twinkling. "Useless to me now. My kids are moving me into a retirement condo. If I transfer the deed to you, you'd technically be a resident." That'd shut Craig up. She raised an eyebrow. "You serious?" "Damn right I am. That man's been power-tripping long enough. Time someone poked a hole in his balloon." She didn't answer right away. But the next day, Evelyn Carter signed a title transfer at the county clerk's office. On paper, she now owned a sliver of Willow Creek, just enough to make things interesting. By April, she submitted an official application to compete in the July 4th match. Craig nearly choked on his breakfast burrito when he saw her name. But the rules, his own rules, couldn't disqualify her now. Marta blinked as she reviewed the entry. "She owns land now. She's a resident." Craig gritted his teeth. "She's gaming the system." "She's playing by the system, Craig." That stung. Still, Craig wasn't about to let his ego be bruised on game day. He doubled down. Hired a full barbecue truck. Invited the press. Brought in a local news anchor. And most of all, he put his nephew Tanner on the top of the program. An up-and-coming Dallas SWAT sniper, known for flashy tricks and social media highlight reels. "Let's show these folks what real accuracy looks like," Craig said to him, clapping him on the back. Back at the ranch, Evelyn didn't react. She just kept practicing. Sharpening. Honing. When Travis asked her if she was nervous, she said one thing. "Nah. It's not about beating them. It's about reminding them." Of what? That a quiet woman with nothing to prove can still rewrite a story. As the date drew closer, Craig sent out flyers with Tanner's picture front and center, gun-shouldered, aviators glinting. He called it the Stars, Stripes and Sharpshooters Showdown. It was no longer a friendly community event, it was a performance. A pageant. A platform to humiliate Evie if she failed. But that was Craig's mistake. He forgot who he was dealing with. One final Saturday before the match, Craig approached Evelyn as she walked past the HOA's park area. He smirked. "Hope you've been getting plenty of practice. Wouldn't want to embarrass yourself next week." Evelyn looked him square in the face. "Calm, Phil. You ever heard of Carlos Hathcock?" Craig blinked. "Who?" "Never mind," she said, walking past him. "You'll understand in a few days." And she meant it. The 4th of July came wrapped in the kind of heat that makes asphalt sweat and flags hang limp in the breeze. Fireworks hadn't even cracked the sky yet, but Willow Creek Estates was already buzzing like a kicked hornet's nest. Red, white, and blue streamers clung to every mailbox. Lawn chairs lined the sidewalks. The community shooting range had been transformed into a carnival of swagger and testosterone. A stage had been hauled in. Loudspeakers blared country music over gunfire and the sizzle of bratwursts on a grill. Craig Dunlow stood center stage in a navy polo shirt tucked a little too tight around his belly, sunglasses perched on his head like a crown. He held a microphone like it was a scepter. "Welcome to the 2025 Stars, Stripes and Sharpshooters Showdown," he bellowed. The crowd clapped politely, many fanning themselves with event programs that prominently featured one man, Tanner Dunlow, Craig's nephew and elite guest, a lean, camera-ready SWAT sniper with a sharp jawline and the confidence of someone who'd never missed a shot in front of an audience. Tanner stood beside a matte black .308 precision rifle mounted on a custom bipod. He wore tactical gear that shimmered under the sun like it had been ironed. He didn't smile. He posed. "This year," Craig continued, "we're raising the bar. This isn't just a neighborhood game anymore. This is a demonstration of discipline, professionalism, and the kind of excellence we stand for here in Willow Creek." Evelyn Carter stood just inside the fence, under the shadow of a sycamore tree. She wore the same sun-faded jeans she always did, an old Marine Corps ball cap, and a long-sleeved flannel despite the heat. Her rifle, a weathered Remington 700 with an aftermarket scope and no unnecessary attachments, was slung casually over her shoulder. She wasn't there for the applause. She was there for the principle. Her name had been called an hour earlier. She'd nodded, signed the waiver, and was issued a participant badge, laminated and freshly printed with E. Carter, Willow Creek resident, under her photo. It had taken Craig a full 5 minutes to find his voice after seeing her paperwork pass inspection. Now, he huddled behind the event table, jaw tight as Marta leaned in. "You okay?" "She's bluffing," he snapped. "She's here to make a scene. She'll fumble and quit before the end of the first round." The competition began with station drills, 10 shots at 3 different distances. Standard stuff. Participants ranged from beer-bellied HOA dads to younger weekend warriors. Some hit targets, some didn't. There were cheers, groans, and one accidental discharge that sent a styrofoam cooler flying. Tanner, of course, was last for each station, the anchor. His shots were clean, fast, and dramatic. He made a show of adjusting his ear protection, slow blinking between rounds, flexing for the cameras like it was a YouTube promo. His fans ate it up. Evelyn? She moved like water. No fanfare. No drama. Every movement precise. Deliberate. Quiet. Her shots rang out with rhythm. No wasted ammo, no double taps, no talk. She didn't outpace Tanner in flash or flare, but the judges, some retired military, one local deputy, raised their eyebrows as her scorecards began to match, and in some cases surpass, the SWAT star. At one point, a young man leaned over to Travis in the bleachers. "Who's the ranch lady?" Travis grinned. "That's Miss Evie. You're about to find out." By early afternoon, the competition narrowed to just 3 names. Tanner Dunlow, Evelyn Carter, Mark Williamson, a competitive shooter from Dallas with a $4,000 rifle and a handshake like a wet sponge. But everyone knew, the showdown was between Tanner and Evelyn. Craig knew it too. His smile had faded. He was sweating now, sipping from a Gatorade bottle like it was whiskey. "She's just lucky," he muttered. "Luck doesn't beat training." Marta finally asked the question no one else had dared. "Craig, did you know she was military?" Craig blinked. "What?" "She was a Marine weapons instructor. My dad served. Said her name's in a training manual. Said she could shoot the wings off a fly." He turned white. The final event wasn't just the climax, it was Craig's masterpiece. A moving target challenge at 800 yards, using an unpredictable oscillating pulley system to mimic high-stress engagement scenarios. Only one shot allowed. The press arrived just as the stage was being reset. A local news van parked beside the grill tent. A reporter, young, perky, hungry for clicks, adjusted her mic and pointed at the range. "We're live here in Willow Creek for what's being called a legendary showdown between a Dallas SWAT sniper and an unexpected hometown challenger." Tanner went first. He adjusted his optics, asked for windage reports, waited for the wind flags to settle. A slight breeze blew from the northeast. The metal silhouette target, shaped like a coyote, began its motion across the back of the range. He exhaled. Fired. Ping. A glancing hit back leg. The crowd cheered. Craig whooped. Unreal, someone shouted. Then Evelyn stepped up. She didn't ask for readings. She didn't squint. She just breathed. And out. She waited not for silence, but for stillness. The kind only trained shooters feel, that exact moment when time and breath and muscle align like the chamber of a clock. Then she fired. Crack. The target didn't just ping, it rang like a bell. Dead center. The crowd gasped. A full 2 seconds passed in stunned silence before the spotter called it. Bullseye. Direct hit. Center mass. The sheriff took off his sunglasses, eyebrows raised so high they nearly reached his hat brim. Tanner stared at the target, then at Evelyn, like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. Craig's Gatorade bottle slipped from his hand, clattering to the concrete. Evelyn stepped back, handed her rifle off for inspection, and turned calmly toward the bleachers. Travis was standing, cheering. So were a dozen others. The reporter blinked and shouted into the camera, "We're witnessing history here today, folks. A retired Marine sharpshooter just outgunned a SWAT sniper in front of his own hometown." Craig stormed off. Later, under the shade of the sycamore, Evelyn sat with a paper plate of barbecue in her lap. Travis brought her a lemonade. "You didn't even flinch," he said, eyes wide. She chuckled softly. "No need to. It was just one shot." "Yeah," he said, "but what a shot." The sheriff approached, hands in his belt. "Miss Carter," he said, nodding. "I had a feeling you were gonna humble some folks today." She smiled. "Didn't do it to humble anyone." "Then why?" She looked out at the distant target, now still, the paint chipped from the perfect hit. "Because sometimes people forget that quiet doesn't mean weak. That age doesn't mean slow. And that respect," she added, glancing toward where Craig had vanished, "isn't given with a badge or a microphone, it's earned." The range fell quiet in the aftermath of Evelyn Carter's shot, not because it had to, but because no one knew what to say. The metal target was still swaying gently at the far end of the field, marked with a single clean hole right at the heart. Even the breeze, thick with the smell of gunpowder and barbecue, seemed to pause. Evelyn didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just stood there, hands folded in front of her like she was waiting for a church hymn to finish. Across the grass, Tanner Dunlow was stone still. The SWAT sharpshooter who strutted in with a GoPro on his chest was now trying not to make eye contact with the news crew. His uncle, Craig, had disappeared entirely, slunk off behind the security tent the moment the spotter confirmed Evelyn's bullseye. Word was, he had been overheard muttering, "This can't be happening," just before the mic cut out. But it was happening. And the neighborhood, even those who had cheered for Craig out of habit, knew they'd just witnessed something different. Not a fluke. Not beginner's luck. A message. Clear and calm as the shot that sent it. By dusk, the event had shifted gears. The trophy ceremony, which Craig had intended to turn into a platform for his HOA re-election campaign, now became a platform for something else entirely: public humility. Marta stood awkwardly at the front stage, holding a golden trophy with an eagle perched on top. She leaned into the mic with a sheepish grin. "And, for our final award, first place in the 2025 Willow Creek Sharpshooter Showdown, we have a very special winner." Her voice faltered as Evelyn stepped forward. She didn't wear camo. She didn't even bring her rifle. Just that quiet flannel, scuffed boots, and a look that said, "I don't need a spotlight to matter." When Marta offered the trophy, Evelyn paused. She looked out at the crowd, at the HOA board members, the neighbors who had once side-eyed her as just that ranch lady, and the younger shooters who'd barely looked up from their phones when she arrived that morning. Then she took the trophy. Not because she wanted it, but because they needed to see her take it. The applause started slow, then grew. It wasn't loud. Not like the cheers Tanner had received earlier. But it was deeper. Real. Even the sheriff clapped, nodding slowly, like a man who'd seen a ghost from an old war return just long enough to remind people why legends are carved in silence, not showmanship. Craig didn't show his face again until the next week. And when he did, it was at an emergency HOA meeting called under the pretense of security review. He tried to spin it, said the event had been hijacked, that Evelyn's public stunt was a risk to the reputation of the community, that letting her compete had opened the floodgates for non-traditional applicants. But Marta had had enough. Craig, she said flatly, interrupting him mid-rant, she owns land. She's a resident. You helped write the bylaw that makes her eligible. You made the rules, remember? That silenced him. I think, she added, turning pages, it's time someone else chaired the competition committee next year. The vote was swift. Craig lost his event privileges. A week later, he quietly stepped down from the HOA presidency altogether. His resignation email mentioned health reasons. Most folks didn't ask questions. As for Evelyn, she didn't mention the win again, didn't hang the trophy in her home, didn't boast about the shot. She gave the award to Travis and told him to keep it in the barn, next to the old feed bags. It's not about the medal, she told him when he asked why. It's about the echo. What echo? The one that lingers when you do something worth remembering. Doesn't have to be loud. Just true. Word spread. By August, a YouTube video from the local news had gone viral. Titled, Ranch Widow Outshoots SWAT Sniper with One Bullet, it racked up 2 million views in 4 days. The comments ranged from Grandma's got Glock to Marine sniper training never dies. Veterans across the state reached out. A few old comrades sent her emails. One former boot camp trainee simply wrote, "Ma'am, I knew that name sounded familiar. You taught me in '92. Semper Fi." Even Tanner, to his credit, sent her a private message. It read, "Miss Carter, you were right. Respect isn't about badges or followers. I got caught up in the noise. You reminded me why I joined the force in the first place. Thank you for the lesson. T. Dunlow." She never replied. Not out of spite, but because the lesson had already landed. No need to shoot twice. Later that fall, Evelyn stood on her porch as Travis loaded up the hay cart. The breeze had a crispness now. The range beyond the HOA fence line was quiet, empty. But there were whispers that next year's competition might be open entry, rebranded as the Carter Invitational. Marta had floated the idea with the sheriff. Evelyn shook her head when she heard. "I didn't do this to get a trophy named after me." Marta had smiled. "No, but people deserve to know why your name matters." And maybe they did. On the last day of the season, as the sky turned orange over the hill, Travis turned to Evelyn and asked the one question still burning in his mind. "Did you know you'd hit the target that clean?" She looked at him. Not with pride. Not with ego. Just that same quiet certainty that had carried her through a life few people understood. "I didn't know," she said, "but I was ready to." Final line. Because sometimes one bullet is all it takes to remind the world, a legend doesn't need permission to make her mark.